On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to be talking KU's top rebounders and assist men for the 2023 to 2024 season. Probably some obvious answers again, but who else is going to contribute overall? Will this team be a good rebounding and passing team? That on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Johnson, you can hear me as well, Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get any of your podcasts. You can also hit me up with any queries or questions or whatever on Twitter, or I guess X as they call it now, at DJohnson Radio. And you can also find us, subscribe to us, like our show on our YouTube page. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're talking rebounding, we're talking assist men. We did our points per game conversation. Hunter Dickinson probably going to be the leader there. Who would be second on last episode of Locked On Jayhawks? Kind of going to be a similar conversation today with the rebounding and assist men. And overall, will this just be a good rebounding and passing team for KU basketball? Let's start right here with the rebounding, first of all. Just as it was with points, Hunter Dickinson is a very clear, easy favorite here for rebounding. Now, in this one, maybe you could convince yourself, like Kevin McCullough averaged, like 7 rebounds per game last year? What happens if Hunter Dickinson is at 7 and Kevin McCullough gets 7.2? You know, like, is this one a little bit more possible that somebody else could end up leading the team? He'd probably be the only other guy that you would look at in that situation. But also, now Kevin's going to be battling with KJ Adams, and I guess, I don't know, Hunter Dickinson, like you had Jalen Wilson last year who was gobbling up rebound. It is entirely possible. Look at Bart Torvik's numbers, what they're projecting for the rebounds. You got 7.9 rebounds per game for Hunter Dickinson to lead the way. I'd probably take the over that. I think somewhere in the 8.5, 9 range. Would it even be crazy if he gets to 10? No, probably not. Those numbers would make sense to me. So, yeah, that's going to be hard to beat. Kevin McCullough, he's at 5.9 rebounds per game, which, yeah, that could be, around the 7 he averaged last year, or it could be right around there if Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams doubles up more rebounds, not having to box out the center on the end. I don't know. We'll see where that goes. I might lean over on that, but it's kind of dependent. Like, what is his role going to be? Like, is he going to be a little different than it was last year? Is he going to play less small ball forward than he did last year, more, whatever it is? I don't know. KJ Adams, 4.8 rebounds per game. That would be one that maybe I'd have to 5 or above. He was at about 4.5 last year. Nick Timberlake at 3.1, Dajuan Harris and Marco Jackson each at 2.8 rebounds per game. And then I don't need to get to the rest, which are all like below 2 rebounds per game, for that, or 2.5 or below. Point is, Hunter Dickinson, clear favorite. Again, he would be the clear betting favorite. It wouldn't be as big of a favorite as the points, but clear favorite to lead the team in rebounds. Assist men, kind of the same thing here. Dajuan Harris on Bart Torvik at 4.9 assists per game. I would skyrocket the over here. He was at 6.5 last year. This seems like a very conservative number for me. I would feel good saying it's probably, you start with the number 6 and you work your way up. Like, if you think you can get 7, you think you can get 8 assists per game, those seem doable to me. So yeah, that's definitely over there, and nobody's probably going to touch that. Even as the projection here on Bart Torvik of 4.9 assists per game, it's not really close who is second. It actually has a cluster of about 4 players between 1.6 and 1.8 assists per game, with KJ Adams, Kevin McCullough, Hunter Dickinson, and Nick Timberlake all in that range of assists per game. So it's not really close. You add 2 of those guys together, KJ and Kevin McCullough, it has them at over an assist less per game than Dajuan Harris. Not really a conversation. Dajuan Harris is going to be your team leader in assists per game. That's, not even close. Even if Arterio Morris plays a ton of minutes, close to that. Even if Elmarco Jackson plays a ton of minutes, he's not going to get close to what Dajuan averages in the numbers for assists per game. So those are your very two clear favorites. I think it's more interesting talking again, like who's going to be second in both of those categories. But one thing I am curious, like how many years do we go into a season? Because now we've kind of checked the list off here and said, you probably know who's going to lead this team in points. You probably know who's going to lead this team in rebounds. You probably know who's going to lead this team in assists. How many seasons do we go into a year where you can say you feel very confident that you know who's going to lead the team in all three categories? Probably Dickinson in points and rebounds, probably Harris in assists. Last year was the case here, right? Last year you came into the season, I don't know. Some people maybe were like, will Jalen Wilson take the next step forward? I felt very confident he was going to be a leading scorer and be your leading rebounder. Like that seemed very obvious to me, especially when you didn't really have a lockdown at the center position that nobody was really emerging to kind of maybe take those rebounds away. And then you knew Dajuan Harris was going to be, assists per game. Heck, probably knew the year before too. Like Ochai Agbaji, he was the leading scorer from the team the year before. Maybe you would have convinced yourself Remy Martin was going to be the point per game, though. That was a little less clear of a conversation. It makes sense looking back to be like, oh, of course Ochai was going to lead him. But I don't know. Preseason, some people were in on maybe Remy Martin leading the team in scoring. And then for rebounds, you probably assume Dave. For, assists, you probably just assume like, I don't know, maybe that one wasn't clear, I guess, because you might have assumed if Remy was going to be the starting point guard, he'd lead the team in assists then too, and it ended up being Dajuan Harris. So maybe that one wasn't even that clear. There are a lot of years where it's not that clear. And I don't know that means anything. I'm not trying to come away with a sweeping conclusion to say the years that you do know who those guys are going to be, it's going to help you and you're better and all this and that. I would, if I were just assuming, is a better thing from the standpoint of, if you know who it's going to be, that probably means you have some really good players on your roster that you feel like are already elite level talent that can carry that away. That's a good thing to have that elite level talent that can do those things and not have a question. The second part of it is it means it's probably returning talent to some degree, like with Dickinson, not returning to KU, but returning to college basketball where he's played at an extremely high level. Dajuan Harris returning to KU, like returning talent is a good thing as well. And I think the third part of that is the strength of it. Sometimes you get into trouble with teams who there's a lot of talent or, players don't know their role. Like certain players think that their role is to play this when in reality it's to be a 3-and-D defender, or it's to be a role player, or it's to be a secondary ball handler, or it's to be, the stopper on the defensive end. And they think they're the guy that should be taking the really contested shots when that's someone else, right? Sometimes teams get into trouble with players not knowing their role. So if you go into a season where you feel very confident knowing this guy's going to lead this guy's going to lead that, and this guy's going to lead that, doesn't that help everyone else form into their role, form into what they need to do to make the team successful around those players being kind of the stars of the show, so to speak? I think that could be really helpful for this team. Now, I don't think it's always necessarily something that if you know those things, it's going to guarantee great success. We do know this team is super talented, but I don't think it can hurt. All right, let's get into who we think could finish second in some of those categories, because that might be a more interesting conversation. And then we'll finish up. Will this team overall be a good rebounding and passing team? First, though, this episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. When I'm going through LinkedIn, I'm not a personal business owner, but I'm not hiring people, but I'm seeing jobs that are hiring when I'm going on LinkedIn to see what, my friends, colleagues, whatever are up to on there. And you can tell the job postings on LinkedIn are just at a premium compared to other sites. We've all been to those other sites, just done a Google search of, jobs available here or there, or whatever industry. The LinkedIn ones are so much better, and they're easier to apply because you're already on LinkedIn. You already have your profile put together. it's a lot easier just to go through the process of applying for that job on LinkedIn and have all your work and data kind of transfer over. So if you're a business, add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to the LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. You want to add the right team member. You want to add that positive locker room presence we always talk about in sports, somebody who is going to want to do, maybe some of the small things that you don't want to do, that's going to take load off of you, but still be a positive influence in the workplace. That's going to be an energy boost for everyone else around you. Helps for sports teams, helps for businesses. Small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedcollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, on to who we think could finish second in rebounds, assists per game for KU basketball here in 2023 to 2024. Hunter Dickinson leading the way there in rebounds. Kevin McCullough has to be the first guess on rebounds. And, the more I think about it, yeah, he was playing the 3 last year and still came up with that many, but also that was kind of dependent on your 5-man not getting a ton. But if you just order it this way anyway and say, well, KJ's still on the front court and Jalen was getting your 9-10 rebounds per game. Okay, well, KJ's still in your front court. Dickinson could get 9-10 rebounds per game. Why couldn't Kevin get, another 7 rebounds per game or whatever he did last year? Maybe there will be more of a role for him on the perimeter and what he's asked to do offensively that maybe it ends up going down to 6 or something like that, or, 5. But we know he is a good rebounder, and he would be my first guess. There has been a lot of conversation, and I've had it here, about how much does having Hunter Dickinson help KJ Adams, where with KJ, we heard from Bill Self directly. We heard from KJ Adams directly over the course of last year, how boxing out defenders was like his main job. And like, he did a great job of it the Kentucky game. You go back and watch that. He was boxing out Oscar Tshiebwe, but wasn't always ending up with the rebound. And so the plus minus of that is if he's boxing out his guy but not getting the rebound, it allows for athletic wings around him to get the rebound and to take away the opposing team, hypothetically's best offensive rebounder. But if your wings weren't rebounding as well, it became a problem, because then your center, who's supposed to be the guy who not just boxing out is grabbing those rebounds, was grabbing them. That was part of plus minus you had to deal with KJ playing kind of an undersized center position. So having Hunter Dickinson, who's not just going to box out the opposing team's biggest player, but also grab a lot of rebounds himself, I would imagine is going to free up KJ Adams to where, it's a little easier to box out a 6'7" wing and get the rebound than it is a 6'10" center where you're using all your strength to get it and then get the rebound. I'm not saying KJ is going to become this elite defensive rebounder. The numbers were not good on the defensive end. He was actually a good offensive rebounder. I would imagine he's actually going to take even a slight step up on the offensive rebounding because of having Hunter Dickinson, to where he'll be able to, crash on guards a lot more and get even more offensive rebounds. I do think from a defensive rebounding standpoint, it'll be a little better than last. Still won't be great, but I could see him being around 5-6 rebounds per game. And if Kevin McCullough is, dropping off, then maybe you end up with him being second. But I think the conversation kind of stops and ends there for me with who would be in contention for that spot. I guess maybe like, is an athletic Marco Jackson, if he's playing the 3 at times, like, is he going to grab a handful of rebounds? Very possible. Parker Brown, like, he might only be playing 10 minutes per game, so tough to grab, 5 rebounds per game every night in that specific role. So I think that would be the answer there. Either KJ or Kevin, with Kevin being the slight favorite. And then for second in assists, Dajuan Harris obviously first. I think the natural inclination would be actually go to one of the other point guards, Arterio Morris, Marco Jackson. But those mostly playing at the 2, and it's next to Dajuan Harris. Could Kevin McCullough get more? Right? If Arterio Morris is playing 25 minutes per game, if Marco Jackson's playing 25 minutes per game, and a lot of those minutes are next to Dajuan Harris, while Kevin McCullough is playing 32 minutes per game, you're on the floor longer, and you two are playing next to Dajuan, but it's kind of mitigating a lot of the assist numbers for other players. what number does that go down to? I could see the role for Arterio Morris being a pressuring ball defender who shoots a lot of threes, creates stuff for this team off the bounce. For Elmarko, I could see those numbers being up, but I think in the case of both Arterio Morris and Elmarko Jackson, you're probably looking somewhere between 2 to 3 assists per game would be my assumption. I think Kevin McCullough probably will be in that range, 2.5 assists per game. I think Hunter Dickinson could be in that range of having the chance to be second on the team in assists per game, right? Like with the amount of times the ball's going to be in his hand and you're going to get players open, shooting threes on the outside of him and him kind of set it up, he could clearly end up with 2.5 assists per game. And I think there's a very real case to be made that like Dajuan could average your 7.5, 8 assists per game. And then there's a cluster, similar to how I'm thinking the points is going to work, of like 3 or 4 players who are somewhere between 1.9 to 2.7, whatever it is, assists per game next season. And those guys will probably be Elmarko Jackson, Arterio Morris, Kevin McCullough, and Hunter Dickinson. And maybe KJ Adams even gets in there around 1.5, 2 assists per game because he is a good passer. And they use him in the short roll situation. I do think it'll be more Hunter Dickinson in those kind of short roll situations this year, but I think KJ will still get him too. And so, yeah, he could be around there too, which will be our last part of this. Will this overall be a good rebounding and passing team for KU? Let's talk about that next with Locked On Jayhawks. Finishing things up with Locked On Jayhawks, will this be a good rebounding and ball movement team overall? Rebounding, I would certainly think so. This was kind of just, I don't know, an above average rebounding team, really the last 2 years. Even the team that won the title, you look at their numbers and, you know, they're average, above average defensive rebounding, above average offensive rebounding. Kind of the same case last year, like, you know, not elite at it, but they were good enough. And yes, there were times when the rebounding became a problem. And, you know, you saw that occur at different points throughout the season. But you compare the numbers to the year before when they were a title winning team and they were pretty in line with that. I think this team has the chance to be one of the better rebounding teams that Bill Self has had since, I don't know, maybe I guess it hasn't been that long. Like the Udoka Azubuike team was a pretty good rebounding team. They've had a lot of great rebounding teams. I think this one will be more in that conversation, though, I guess is where I'm going with this. I don't think they'll be, you know, Baylor where they're number 1 in offensive rebounding rate, or West Virginia where they're, you know, typically top 5 in that metric, or, you know, one of these teams that's top 10. But I think this is a team that instead of being like around the, you know, 80 to 130 range in some of those numbers, maybe is closer to like top 50, because I think offensive rebounding wise, KJ is a good offensive rebounder. Hunter Dickinson's a proficient offensive rebounder. You have athletic wings and guards that can crash the glass. I think you should be a pretty good offensive rebounding. Defensive rebounding, Hunter Dickinson, just having that guy, I think will make you a good defensive rebounding team on his own. And yeah, you still do have Kevin McCullough, who's a good defensive rebounder. And, you know, if KJ Adams can improve in that regard, you'll have athletic guards crashing the glass. I think this will be a good enough defensive rebounding team. So I think they'll actually be better at offensive and defensive rebounding than they were the last 2 years at the very least. And then as far as passing, this team was last year 19th in the country, according to KenPom, in assists per field goal rate a year ago. So they were already a really good passing team last season. I think part of that was you don't have a lot of guys who are just creating for themselves off the dribble. Naturally, this number is going to go up. So it's one of those things where it's like, you know, you don't necessarily want to be the number 1 team in it, because that probably means that you're only getting your offense off assists and nobody can create for themselves off the bat. You also don't want to be at the bottom of the list, because that means you're not a good passing team. Ideally, you'd prefer to be better at it than worse at it. But there is a line there where it's like, okay, you don't want to be, again, only dependent on you have to score off a setup pass, because that's hard to replicate over and over again in an NCAA tournament game. I would think this is going to be a really good passing team, though. I talked about Dajuan Harris. That on its own makes you a good passing team. And think about your entire starting 5. If it's Dajuan Harris, Arterio Morris, that's 2 point guards. Okay, should be good at passing there. Kevin McCullough, he's a good passer for a wing. KJ Adams was a good passer for kind of a big man forward type last year. And Hunter Dickinson's a good passer for a 5. That's 5 plus passers to some regard per their position on your roster or in your starting off the bench, and it's like, well, Marco Jackson, he's a good passer, good court vision, kind of coming off the bench for you, to where this should be a really good passing team. And I think they might have even more ability to create off the dribble than they did last year. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe not. Maybe that's not the right way to put it. More ability to create in the half court, because I don't view like Hunter Dickinson creating off the dribble, but being able to post up in the half court, something you didn't have last year. So I do think this is going to be a really good assist team. I don't know if they'll be quite as good as they were last year. That's a really high number to be at, but I think they'll be right around it. And I think in terms of passing to win and what that means and everything, they'll be really elite at it next season, which, I think could be a very big strength for this team. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Give me out on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. You can find the show wherever you get any of your podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, Apple, wherever. And also give us a like, check out our page, subscribe on our YouTube page. Have a good one. We'll see you next time with Locked On Jayhawks.